you set that first appointment, there's this moment of exhilaration, and then there's this drop in your stomach. What do I say at the qualifying conversation? How do I figure out if this person is a real customer? How do I move them from being willing to take that first call with me to actually wanting to buy with me? In this conversation, I'm going to walk you through the parts of a qualifying conversation so you can bridge that gap between the initial cold call and the initial appointment to your presentation meeting. Let's get into it. When I first started selling insurance, I thought that the purpose of a qualifying conversation was to collect underwriting information so I could get a quote for my prospect. And that was wrong, and I was totally missing the point. Here's what you're trying to do with a qualifying conversation. You are trying to identify if that prospect feels pains that you can solve. So ideally, with your cold call, you have introduced the idea of the types of pains that you can solve. And in this qualifying conversation, you're going to go deeper and understand really well what it is that they're feeling so that you can set yourself up for a presentation meeting. In my mind, a qualifying conversation has three parts. The first one is, what's the current situation? The second is, do they have pains that we can solve? And the third is, what are the next steps? So when we open a qualifying conversation, we've probably talked to someone for 2 minutes. They've heard our opening statement. Something about that opening statement has caught their attention and makes them willing to talk to us longer, but we don't know what that is. So the first question we should ask is, what makes you willing to talk to me today? You'll hear a lot of different answers. One may be, well, you called me. Another may be, look, I've been feeling this terrible pain about audits, or I think I pay way too much. Or they may say, I'm just not quite sure if I have the right program, or I have a hard time getting responses. But anyway, they're going to open with what their primary pain is that they are trying to solve with this entire process. That's going to set us up for how we run the rest of this conversation. Now, I want to go to one of the first objections that you may hear, which is, well, you called me. I think you got to push back a little bit on that person. And what you have to say is, well, yes, I did. That's my job. But you probably get a lot of calls from people like me. So what separated me from somebody else? What makes you willing to talk to me for 15 minutes? Oh, well, I'm feeling this, this, and this. It's so important to understand what is that bright, shining pain that they are feeling that makes them willing to talk to a salesperson, because that's a big hurdle. That's going to set you up for the rest of the conversation. Once you understand that primary pain, then you ask a few things like, well, who are you working with? And how much are you paying? What's the current situation? You want to understand if they're attached to the insurance company or their broker or a person or a customer service rep, because they're going to have to be willing to disengage from the parts of the situation they like the best in order to work for you. And the truth with insurance is it's very rare that somebody is 100% ready to disengage from everything in their current situation. Most times, there's something in their situation they feel an allegiance to. They may really like the insurance company, but the broker doesn't get back with them. They may really like the customer service representative, but there's nothing proactive about their situation. You get the point. The idea is that you need to know what are the ties to their current situation that they're going to have to be willing to cut in order to move to you. It's going to help you understand the biggest hurdles to change. Once we know their current situation, what's got them here, now we need to know how they really feel about that current situation and what they wish they could do to improve on it. There's three key questions that I use in this part of the conversation every time. It's, what's the process look like when you go to the marketplace? It's, what's your renewal process look like? And what's your 3 to 5 year plan look like? Now, there's a whole lot of questions that can come after each of those, but those are the three I go to every time, because most people's problems tie into how they buy insurance. So when we start talking about, well, when you went to market, what did that process look like? We want to know, what was the plan for approaching underwriting? How did you make sure you had a great submission together? How did you evaluate that information when it came back? How did you use multiple companies to create leverage? Who were those companies? Start getting into the details, but it starts with that initial question. And what we're trying to unpack is the level of transparency that their current broker is providing into the situation. Because what you'll find is that most brokers don't provide a whole lot of insight. They come back with one option and they say, well, this is the best one. Or they say, there's nothing else available. Or any one of a number of things. I've even had situations where brokers hide other options in the marketplace because they didn't want to do the paperwork. But you won't know that unless you use the questions to pull the situation out of your customer's brain. And what you need to help them connect those questions to is their primary pain. So if they say, I feel like I pay too much, what you're then going to tie it back to is, okay, you pay too much, but what was the plan to create leverage so that an underwriter would get more aggressive on your plan? What did they do to eliminate underwriting concerns for your account? And so then on the second question is, what's the renewal process? Part of keeping costs down is making sure there's a plan to stay in touch every year so that people don't get blindsided. So what's the renewal strategy meeting? What is your plan to stay in front of the market? How are you keeping track of the changes in the marketplace? If you know there's going to be big changes, how do you present yourself accordingly? You just keep digging and digging and digging because this is your value proposition. And if you have a different value proposition, you need to have a different list of questions, but you're really trying to pull the pains out of the customer's mind and help them experience doubt about that current situation and make them feel more and more and more like, oh, hey, I thought it was bad, but it's really bad and I need to make a change. And then my third question is the 3 to 5 year strategy, because most brokers, when they call, are saying, I can help you save money this year. I can help you save money this year. But every customer is saying, well, what are you going to do next year? Are you just going to disappear? I mean, what's the plan after that? So what if you do something just this year? Am I going to have to go through this same process every year just to keep my broker accountable? So that's when I start pulling out of that. It's like, okay, so you tie that renewal strategy with, what's the plan to go to the market next time? How often should you do that? How do you make sure you're not doing it too often? But how do you make sure you don't get hit with huge increases last minute? The hope is that all these questions are going to pull doubts and concerns out of the mind of the prospect so that you have something to address. After we've asked all those questions in second section, now we have to come to an agreement with the customer about what are the next steps. They may have said, there's nothing wrong with my program, or they may have listed a lot of things that were wrong with what's going on. Either way, we now have this question that needs to be resolved between us as the salesperson and the buyer. Is, where do we go from here? What do you want to do? And so that's the list of questions. Okay, we talked about these things. Where do you want to go from here? And the customer will tell you. And if they tell you, now you've been really helpful with this, I don't think there's a next step, then it's over. It's okay. If they say, well, I think I need to get someone else involved, then that's the next step. But asking, where do you want to go from here, gets the customer to tell you what the next steps are in the buying process. When you do that, you're allowing them to drive, which makes people feel in control and in power of the situation, which is going to help them feel better about working with you. Because if they feel like they're telling you what the next steps are, they're not going to feel like you're ramrodding them into a certain next step or situation. After you know what they want to do, then it's understanding the timeline. How soon does this need to happen? And they'll say, my gosh, I've got a renewal in 3 weeks. I need to meet with you immediately. Okay, well, let's get something on the calendar. Or they may say, my renewal's in 9 months. How about we set something up in about 5? Okay, we can do that. Timeline's very important. Making sure that you fit inside their idea of what the process should look like, once again, helps them feel like they're in control of the process. And then we also need to understand who. Are we talking to the person that's going to stroke the check, or are they going to need to bring somebody else in to evaluate the solution? And if that's the case, then the next step at the presentation meeting, we should be asking if that other person should get involved at that point. If you don't get the decision maker involved at the presentation, you have a much lower probability of winning the deal because they won't have a chance to shape the solution. And it's human psychology. If you don't get the chance to speak into a solution, your first answer is to say no. So it's very important that we get the right who's involved. Once you get through all three of those sections, you should be able to explain what's their current situation, who's their current broker, who's the company. You should be able to explain what are their pains. Are they strong enough for them to consider a new solution? Once you get through those three sections, you should be able to articulate what is their current situation, who's their broker, which company are they with, why are they even willing to talk to somebody, what are their pains, how deep are they, what are they hoping to find in a new solution. And then you should be able to articulate what's the timeline, where are we going next, and who's going to be in there. You should have a really good sense of how good this opportunity is so you know what to do with it. Now, if you're watching this video and you're thinking, well, that all sounds great, but how do I get these appointments? There's a couple of other videos that you should check out in my How to Be a Commercial Insurance Producer playlist. You should be looking at cold call scripts for insurance producers, proven and repeatable. You should also look at how to build a list because those are the two key parts of getting in front of your ideal customer and then getting an appointment. You should also look at how to be the best in your niche. There's videos there. Those are all the key components of getting appointments with your ideal customer. Hey, if this was helpful, hit like and subscribe. If you've got questions, drop them in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. Go build something great.